day here. My rant over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "What is the Wealth of a Nation?" And, I think this is a really important point. What is and to point out that it's time to break the curse of Voodoo Economics and return to manufacturing at the core of our economy if we want to make our country wealthy. So, let me just lay this out. China, the news hook, as it were, for this story today is that it was reported this week that late last year, early this year, China surpassed the United States as the wealthiest nation in the world. What does that mean? Does that mean they have the most money in their checking accounts? Turns out, no. It means they have the most actual wealth. Now, yeah, money represents wealth, but that's not what this is about. What is, for example, your wealth? I mean, look around you. If you're at home, you're seeing a living room with furniture, a television. In the kitchen, there are appliances, dishes, cookware. Rooms have beds, desks, bookshelves, tools, computers. The house sits on a foundation. It's made out of 2x4s and sheetrock and copper wiring and plumbing and siding and roofing. All of that is wealth. This is all stuff that has value. Value in this sense isn't cost. Cost, the value is intrinsic to the items themselves, their ability to make life better for us. They were purchased at a particular time at a particular price with something else of value, for example, money in exchange for hours of your work. But because most of them are manufactured goods that will last for years, decades, maybe even centuries, they represent lasting wealth. And all of them together, your home, all the stuff in it, that's part of your wealth. Now add your home to all the others in the country of all sizes and shapes and all sorts. Add in the commercial space in the country, all the buildings, the farms and the farmland, everything touched by human hands or machinery. And what you have basically is the wealth of the nation. So how does a nation create wealth? Well, if there's a factory down the street that's taking in freshly sawed wood and turning it into furniture, they're literally creating wealth. They're taking the raw material of a forest, they're applying human labor to it, and they're producing things of lasting value. That's wealth. But what if they're making hamburgers instead of furniture? I mean, it's a continuous thread from nature to your mouth, right? Plants are grown, they're fed to animals, the animals are slaughtered, they're processed, they're added to pickles and tomatoes and onions and lettuce and buns and poof, you've got, ketchup, you've got a hamburger. But does that represent wealth? No, it doesn't. And this is the difference between a manufacturing economy and a service economy. Ronald Reagan notwithstanding, I realize he tried to reclassify McDonald's as a manufacturing facility because our manufacturing numbers started falling off the edge of the earth in the 1980s. But creating burgers doesn't create any more wealth than if I loaned you $1,000 and you paid me back $1,100 with, $100 interest. Does that create wealth? Well, it puts $100 in my pocket, but where'd it come from? Did it get created out of nowhere as a result of human labor, like, turning a piece of wood into a piece of furniture? No, it didn't get created. It got transferred. That $100 interest was transferred from you to me, or vice versa if you had loaned me the money. That's called financial activity, right? As Adam Smith wrote in his book, Wealth of Nations, back in 1776, well, actually, the title of the first chapter of his book lays it out. He was into long titles. And this was the title of the first chapter, quote, "Of the causes of improvement in the productive powers of labor and of the order according to which its produce is naturally distributed among the different ranks of the people." In other words, the productive power of labor is what produces wealth. Adam Smith wrote, this is a quote from his book, Wealth of Nations, "The most opulent nations indeed generally excel all their neighbors in agriculture as well as in manufacturing, but they are commonly more distinguished by their superiority in the latter, in manufacturing, than in the former, in agriculture." When Reagan tried to call fast food manufacturing, William Sarin in the New York Times called him out. This is May 31st, 1982. The title was, the headline in the New York Times, "Big Mac supplants Big Steel as manufacturing jobs lag." Quote, When steel is made, for example, jobs are provided not only in the steel mills, but ultimately in the production of items made from steel, such as cars, farm equipment, and home appliances, and in the sale and repair of those items. When a hamburger is sold, it's merely consumed. No further jobs are created. But jobs in the steel industry decreased 14%, and today the industry has 30% unemployment. Keep in mind, this was the Reagan 80s, as our country began to collapse under the burden of Reagan's neoliberal ideas. I lived and studied in Beijing back in November of 1986. And I remember standing in Tiananmen Square. There's this giant, a major road, like a 10, 12 lane road, just kind of across the way from Tiananmen Square. And I remember standing there in Tiananmen Square and watching this ocean of black bicycles. Keep in mind, this was 1986. An ocean of black bicycles. Maybe every 10 minutes, a single car would go by. They were always black limousines. They were government officials. The air was thick with smoke from coal, which was piled. These coal briquettes were piled in neat little 3-foot tall pyramids on the back streets and the residential streets. And everybody heated just one room in their house. This was November. No skyscrapers, no neon lights, no vibrant storefronts. The streets were covered with coal dust. The houses and apartments were gray and drab, and everybody dressed the same in cheap cotton clothing. That was 1986 in China. The very next year, Deng Xiaoping decided to reject neoliberalism, being pushed on him by Reagan and the Chicago schoolboys, and instead threw in with Alexander Hamilton's American plan. I've talked about this a lot. And China now creates wealth by making things. And as a consequence, now that they have all this wealth, when we buy things from them, we give them dollars. What do they do with the dollars? Well, you have to spend dollars ultimately in the United States because we created them. So they bring the dollars back to the United States and they buy our real estate. In just 2017 through 2018, they picked up 80,000 U.S. residential properties, which is driving up the price of real estate. They're buying our company. Remember Smithfield Foods? The company where Donald Trump ordered workers back to work. They've got 500 farms across the United States. They call them farms. I call them factory farms. They're owned by China or Chinese. 40% of the asset values of all companies in America now are foreign owned. Why? Because we are not making things here anymore. This whole Milton Friedman's whole neoliberal free trade agenda has just devastated America. We've sold off our companies and our real estate to foreign interests, and now we've got these so-called supply chain disruptions, and everybody's trying to blame this on Biden. Isn't it amazing? All the media, supply chain disruptions, Joe Biden's in trouble. Well, why do we have supply chain disruptions? Because we have a supply chain to Asia. Why do we have a supply chain to Asia? Reaganomics. Neoliberal free trade policy. Reagan renegotiated the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Reagan and Bush negotiated NAFTA. And yeah, Clinton signed it and went along with the program. I mean, nobody has pushed back on this other than Trump, and he did it in a completely incompetent, totally confused way. So basically, there's been no effective pushback on this since the 80s. In 1975, we had a $16 billion trade surplus. Now we're averaging $700 billion a year in a trade deficit, which means that basically every year, another $700 billion of America gets sold to some, to people, businesses, or governments outside the United States. Finance doesn't make a damn thing. Nathan Lewis in Forbes, he said, our financial system is basically a bloated parasite. During the 60s, the financial industry accounted for 6.2% of all employment income, 14% of corporate profits. By 2014, it accounted for 12.5% of all employment income and 26% of all corporate profits. And finance doesn't make a damn thing. We've got to start manufacturing again in the United States. We've got to start manufacturing in the United States. What we need is an honest debate about how to make that transition. Nobody's even discussing it. Instead, they're sitting around complaining that Joe Biden hasn't been able to magically fix the supply chain that 40 years of Reaganism brought us. How is this a good thing? We have to begin talking about this.